After 11 years of uncertainty, a twist in the tale emerged on April 4, 2005. That day, a viewer of a television show designed to shed light on unsolved mysteries recognized two individuals featured on the program. These individuals bore a striking resemblance to Bobbi Parker and Randolph Dial, who had been missing for over a decade. The tip sparked immediate action from law enforcement, who traced the lead to a remote location in Paniwoods near the Louisiana border. There, hidden among the quiet expanse of nature, was a trailer that had become home to Bobbi and Randolph. Under the fake names, Richard and Samantha, they had crafted a life far removed from their pasts, evading discovery for years. Upon finding them, officers encountered a scene that revealed the day-to-day existence Bobbi and Randolph had established. In the trailer, there were objects found, which added a big confusion to police. There were sex toys, love letters, couple photos, and gift cards found. Living under fake names, they had blended into their surroundings, their true identities known only to themselves. The trailer and the farm it sat on were the final pieces of a puzzle that had confused many for over a decade. This discovery brought an end to the long search for Bobbi Parker, unveiling the reality of her years away. The circumstances of their life in Paniwoods, under assumed identities, opened a new chapter in understanding what had transpired since that fateful day in 1994. Throughout the trial, the narratives surrounding Bobbi Parker and Randolph Dial were deeply conflicting and complex. Dial claimed to have manipulated and held Bobbi against her will, painting a picture of control and coercion. This portrayal was meant to suggest a clear-cut dynamic of captor and captive, with Dial asserting dominance over Bobbi's circumstances and decisions. Contrastingly, Bobbi maintained she was a victim of abuse and manipulation, coerced into staying with Dial under the threat of harm to her family. Her account spoke to a fear that overshadowed her years in hiding, a fear so pervasive that it dictated her actions and her silence. However, the evidence presented during the trial painted a more nuanced and contradictory picture of their life together, challenging the straightforward narratives put forth by both Dial and Bobbi. Despite Dial's assertion that they slept separately, the discovery of only one bed in the trailer where they were found suggested a level of intimacy or cohabitation at odds with his claim. Similarly, while Bobbi insisted on a lack of emotional connection to Dial, the objects found within their shared space, including personal items and photographs, hinted at a more complicated relationship than either was willing to admit. Further complicating the narrative were the opportunities Bobbi seemingly had to leave Dial, especially during times when he was out of the home or incapacitated due to illness. Witnesses and evidence pointed to instances where Bobbi ventured into public alone, raising questions about her claims of being held against her will. Notably, her efforts to seek medical help for Dial during his health crises painted a picture of concern that conflicted with her assertions of fear and detachment. These discrepancies in accounts and evidence introduced a profound ambiguity into the trial, leaving more questions than answers about the true nature of Bobbi and Randolph's relationship, their individual motivations, and the reality of their years spent away from the public eye. The complexity of their story, a tangle of fear, manipulation, and contradictory evidence, left both the court and the public grappling with the elusive truth of what transpired during those missing years. The trial concerning Bobbi Parker's disappearance and the circumstances surrounding it was both exhaustive and historic. Spanning several weeks, it captured public attention due to the complexity of the case and the individuals involved. The legal proceedings were marked by the presentation of over 800 pieces of evidence, a testament to the thorough investigation that had taken place over the years Bobbi was missing. The prosecution aimed to build a narrative that meticulously pieced together the events leading up to and following Bobbi's disappearance. Utilizing a wide array of evidence, including eyewitness testimonies, forensic findings, and the items discovered in the trailer where Bobbi and Randolph Dial were found, prosecutors sought to paint a comprehensive picture of Dial's influence and actions. Additionally, Jack Cowie, in the days leading up to Bobbi Parker's disappearance, observed Bobbi and Randolph Dial sharing moments that appeared casual and congenial. He recounted seeing them drinking coffee together, an interaction marked by smiles and what could be interpreted as flirting. These observations were made in a context that seemed everyday and unremarkable at the time, yet, in hindsight, they became poignant details, considering the events that followed. This glimpse into their interactions provided a contrasting snapshot to the complex narratives that would later emerge surrounding Bobbi's disappearance. On the other hand, the defense focused on casting doubt on the prosecution's narrative, emphasizing the lack of direct evidence linking Bobbi to any criminal intent or actions. They highlighted Bobbi's character, her role in the community, and her relationship with her family to suggest that her situation was far more complex than the prosecution suggested. The defense posited a compelling argument centered on the psychological impact of Bobbi Parker's prolonged exposure to Randolph Dial. They suggested that Dial, through manipulation and psychological control, had significantly influenced Bobbi's perceptions and decisions. This influence, they argued, was so profound that it altered Bobbi's ability to act independently, leading to behaviors that might otherwise seem contradictory to her own interests. Central to the defense's case was the concept of Stockholm Syndrome, a psychological response sometimes seen in hostages or abduction victims. This condition causes victims to develop empathy toward their captors, often leading to a confusing mix of loyalty, affection, and fear. The defense argued that Bobbi's actions, her reluctance to leave Dial when opportunities arose, her care for him during his illnesses, and even her efforts to maintain a semblance of normalcy under extraordinary circumstances, could be understood through the lens of Stockholm Syndrome. By framing Bobbi's experience in this context, the defense aimed to explain the complex, often paradoxical nature of her relationship with Dial. They sought to illustrate that her decisions and actions, while with Dial, were not indicative of consent or complicity, but were the results of psychological influence and the survival strategies of someone experiencing Stockholm Syndrome. Throughout the trial, both sides engaged in a detailed examination of the evidence, calling upon experts and witnesses to support their arguments. The legal teams delved into the psychological and circumstantial aspects of the case, attempting to sway the jury with their interpretation of the events and the evidence presented. The trial, a culmination of years of speculation, investigation, and heartache, reached its climax as the jury retired to deliberate. The weight of their decision hung heavily in the air, a resolution to a mystery that had captivated and divided the public. After hours of reviewing over 800 pieces of evidence and countless testimonies, the jury reached a verdict. Bobbi Parker was found guilty. The jury, tasked with untangling the web of evidence and testimonies, concluded that Bobbi had played a role in her own disappearance. The sentencing that followed was a somber moment, marking the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Bobbi was sentenced, but the story was far from over. The verdict stirred a whirlwind of emotions and lingering contentions. For some, justice seemed to be served. For others, questions remained unanswered. The complexities of Bobbi's case, the nuances of her relationship with Randolph Dial, the psychological aspects, and the evidence presented, left room for debate and discussion. Bobbi, facing the reality of her conviction, signaled her intent to appeal. The financial hurdles of such a legal battle loomed large, yet the determination to fight the conviction was undeterred. The aftermath of the trial was a period of reflection, adjustment, and continued legal strategies. It was a time marked by both the desire to move forward and the resolve to challenge the verdict. In the conclusion of a trial that had captured the nation's attention, Bobbi Parker was sentenced to 10 years for helping Randolph Dial in his escape. However, taking into account her psychological state, influenced by the years of manipulation and alleged coercion she endured, her sentence was significantly decreased to just 1 year. Throughout the legal battles and the public scrutiny, Randy Parker stood by Bobbi, his faith in his wife unshaken. He supported her, believing in her innocence and the complex circumstances that led to her involvement in the case. The defense argued vigorously that Bobbi was taken against her will, detailing how Dial had forcibly taken her to the minivan and kidnapped her. They painted a picture of a woman threatened with the harm of her husband and daughters should she attempt to escape or disclose her predicament to authorities. This narrative of coercion and fear underpinned their case, highlighting the psychological grip Dial had on Bobbi. Ultimately, Bobbi Parker served only 6 months of her sentence before being released. Her reunion with her family was a poignant moment, marking the end of a long and tumultuous chapter in their lives. Randy's unwavering support had been a beacon of hope through her darkest times, and together, they began the process of healing and moving forward. Randolph Dial, the man at the center of this complex case, passed away from cancer on June 13, 2007, at the age of 62. At the time of his death, he was back in custody, serving the remainder of his life sentence for the murder conviction that preceded his escape. Dial's death closed the final chapter on a story that had gripped Oklahoma, leaving behind a legacy of questions about justice, survival, and the human capacity to endure. Now, what does the contrasting portrayal of Bobbi Parker's relationship with Randolph Dial reveal about our understanding of victimhood and agency? What does this case teach us about the nature of truth in situations where narratives are deeply intertwined with individual perceptions and survival strategies? Lastly, how do we, as a society, support those who find themselves entangled in situations of manipulation and coercion, ensuring justice while recognizing the nuanced realities of their experiences? These questions, lingering in the aftermath of Bobbi Parker's story, challenge us to delve deeper into our understanding of the human condition, the justice system, and the fine line between perception and reality. Thank you for joining us in today's journey. Subscribe, hit the bell, and let's keep exploring the criminal cases together. Stay curious, stay alert, and see you next time.